I like it. All right, welcome back. I know that was like the shortest break ever, right? You didn't even get to introduce yourself to someone, and then you're like called back in here. But I want all of you guys to know who are sitting in these chairs here, that there is a couch right there, which one person has very intelligently claimed, which I appreciate. I appreciate your foresight to sit just outside, but on a couch, which is really, really intelligent. I am going to try and help you imagine a moment that I think we all come to at some point in our businesses, which is when you're sitting there and you're trying to think of what everyone's told you to do, which is picture the future. What's your business going to be like 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 3 years from now? What's your customer going to be like? How are they going to behave? What are they going to be looking for? What platforms are they going to be using? We raised a lot of those questions earlier, right? Should we be on Facebook? Should we be posting videos to Facebook now because that's the way to do it and not on YouTube anymore? Should we post videos in both places? Should we be periscoping everything, right? There's a lot of new things that come up all the time. And I'm, on some level, kind of paid to keep up with them, and it's hard for me. And I'm guessing most of you aren't paid to keep up with them, and so it's even harder for you. So one of the things that I want you to picture is that you're sitting in that meeting or by yourself in front of that computer if you're a one-man or one-woman show, and you're trying to picture the future. How do you do that? What do you think about? What pieces of the puzzle need to be there? How do you do something other than Google trends for the future and then copy and paste whatever you get? What's the better way to do that? Right. So my goal is very simple today. It's to give you the tools to have the superhuman skill of predicting the future. So I don't just want to tell you the trends that I've found through my research. I will do that. And I'll feature 5 of the 15 trends because we don't have unlimited time, and I've picked the 5 that I think will be most relevant for you guys. But of course, the books are out there, and I'll happily talk about any of the other ones if you guys have questions as you're flipping through. But I've picked 5 that I think are relevant for you. But more importantly, I want to give you the tools to be able to think about the future for yourself. And I think if you can do that, then you'll have a better answer to that question than Googling. So our enemy right now is Googling, and our solution is knowledge. Right? And that's what I want to try and give you. So I'll start with a moment that is coming up very rapidly, which is this day, which is very, very important. If you don't have it written down on your calendar, if you don't have an alert in your calendar, you should do it right now, because October 21st of this year is the future. Right? Officially the future. The day that Marty McFly arrived in the future from Back to the Future. So according to the film, that is the future. Right? We've now hit it 30 years after that film. For real. It's not like a Facebook joke. Right? This is for real, the future, and it's this year. So now you're probably thinking the same thing I am, which is, where's my hoverboard? Right? Why did I have to drive here? Why couldn't I use my hoverboard? Well, the good news is the hoverboard and, of course, the self-tying sneakers, the hoverboard's real. There's a company that's invented a hoverboard, and they introduced it last year. And Nike, very intelligently, is going to use October 21st to premiere their self-tying laces, which, by the way, were Nike's in the movie. And so, of course, Nike has to create self-tying laces. So the future, according to Back to the Future, is kind of already here. Right? Now, raise your hand if the hoverboard or the self-tying laces is the future for your business, if it's something you're going to sell. Maybe you're a customer of it, right? I might be too, if they weren't so expensive. But is that your future, right? Probably not. That future is not as relevant, right? The future is something that we need to imagine it, right? So what I want to do is give you that picture so that when I say, what is the future, you'll be able to raise your hand. Not like a minion, right, which is just raising their hand because it's fun and they want a banana. No. I want you to be able to raise your hand because you actually have an answer. So a trend to me is a curated observation of the accelerating present. And if it's a curated observation of the accelerating present, what it means is we just need to get better at observing the present. Right? How many times do we walk around not paying attention to the things around us? I read an article a couple of months ago, and it said that gum sales at grocery stores have tanked. The reason they've tanked is because when people stand in line, they don't buy the gum anymore. They sit there and look at their phone until it's their turn to check out. So we're not buying that stuff that they've lined up to tempt us unless it's our kids, and then of course they want all of that stuff, right? Which is the most frustrating thing ever. But we're not buying it, and so the sales are down. Because we don't live our lives anymore with our head up. We live our lives with our head down in each moment because we don't want to waste any time. We want to be productive in every moment. And so part of predicting the future means avoiding that temptation, right? Not having your head down in every idle moment, but actually having your head up, of actually paying attention. Isaac Asimov said it best when he talked about some of his books, right? And I don't know if you guys know this about Isaac Asimov. It's fascinating. Of course, he was a science fiction writer, but he wrote hundreds of books in his lifetime, among which was a guide to the entire Bible, how to read the whole Bible. He wrote a guide to every Shakespearean play ever written, hundreds of pages on how to read Shakespeare. I mean, the guy had a thirst for knowledge far outside of science fiction. He wasn't just a science fiction writer. And one time in an interview, when a member of the press asked him, they said, "What's your favorite book that you've ever written?" The guy's written hundreds of books. He had the best answer ever, which I aspire to have as an author when I have as many books as he does, right? Which is the last one I just wrote. Because that's where his mind was. That's what he focused on. And when he talked about his thirst for knowledge, he said, "Look, I'm not a speed reader. I'm a speed understander." Now think about that for a second. What if you could be a speed understander? If you could understand the signs that happen, the patterns that happen in our daily lives, if you could observe them by picking your head up, which doesn't sound that hard, right? It's just a little bit of discipline. But if you could actually understand what they mean, if you could make those connections, how could that change your business? That's what we want to try and talk about today. So there's a reason why predicting the future matters. And if you imagine that there's an axis, right? And hope is on one side and knowledge is on the other side. So you have high hope and high knowledge. If you have no hope and no knowledge, you're just unhappy, right? You're hopeless, literally hopeless. If, however, you have high knowledge and low hope, you're a pessimist. You just don't believe anything's going to be good. If you have a lot of hope and no knowledge, let's face it, you're just annoying, right? Nobody wants to listen to that guy because it's a pain. But if you have a lot of hope and a lot of knowledge, then you're profitable and happy. And that's where we want to be. That's where I want you to be. And I want to help you get the knowledge to be able to get there. So that's our goal. That's where we want to be. That's the place that you are if you're a speed understander, right? Speed understanders live in that quadrant. That's their quadrant. That's where we all should be. And I think we can get there. So here's the not-so-secret method. Here's how I do it, right? And I've been doing this for 5 years, this method for predicting the future, for predicting trends. And it starts with a story about this guy. His name's Christian Ringes, and he's a Norwegian billionaire. And I encountered his story when I traveled to Norway, and it's a fascinating story of a guy who is obsessed with collecting. And of course, he has the resources to be able to collect. And what he collects is artwork, and one very, very quirky item, which hardly could be considered artwork, which is mini liquor bottles. He has the world's foremost collection of mini liquor bottles, more than 50,000 of these liquor bottles. And like many obsessed collectors, he had all of these liquor bottles in the most predictable place ever, which is his basement of his mansion in Oslo, which he happily kept until a moment that many collectors will realize when his significant other, his wife, said, "Get this stuff out of here. It's really clogging everything up, and I don't want it here anymore." So he had a problem, right? He's a collector. He spent his entire lifetime collecting this stuff that seems insignificant to any of us, but was really important to him. And he had the resources, so he decided not to sell it or get rid of it, but to build a museum around it, which is the Mini Bottle Gallery in Oslo. So it's an actual museum, and this is the picture of the inside of it. And they hold events there. I actually spoke at an event there. That's how I found out about this whole story. But if you picture that moment, right, when those guys are taking 50,000 of these mini liquor bottles out of his basement, putting them into trucks, moving them into the museum, which is a beautiful piece of architecture. You can't take 50,000 liquor bottles, put them into a museum, and have that be a meaningful experience. It doesn't work. You need something else. You need a story. And that's what they did. So they started grouping these bottles into themes. They have a room for macabre bottles that have like little petrified skulls inside of the bottle, or like worms inside of the bottle. They have an entire room for the red light district in Amsterdam that has all the bottles that that someone else probably collected from the red light district, and he just, purchased secondhand, of course. But they have all these different rooms. And as you travel through these rooms, first of all, it tells an amazing story, and it's actually a compelling story. And you forget that you're looking at something that seemed on the outside to be just a frivolous collection. And you're actually taking a journey with him. You're taking a journey through an experience, which is what every museum does. But the other thing that you realize as you look at these is there's only 17,000 of these bottles on display at any one time, which means more than half of his collection is still kept underground in a vault. He's not displaying it at all. And so part of the value of doing that is he's curating it by removing the noise. And by removing the noise, he makes the 17,000 bottles, he and his team, of course, make the 17,000 bottles that they show meaningful. That's the power of curation. Now think about that in your own roles, right? What if when we think about trends, and we think about spotting trends, we didn't think about them as a needle in a haystack, the obvious cliche, right? Which is someone has some sort of guru-like ability to see that needle and say, that's the trend. What if instead the really important thing was spending enough time to gather up all of this hay in one place? And if you did that, you would have enough knowledge to take that needle, stick it in the middle, and say, that's what it means. That's the trend. That's the point, right? That is, in a nutshell, the method that I use, right? And this is the method from the book that goes from gathering ideas, saving interesting ideas, to aggregating them into different clusters, to then naming them in some way, to elevating them, to proving them out, right? That's the basic method. That's the haystack method, right? Now, I don't want to go too far into process, but I want to give you a picture of how this works in real life. So I was traveling here. I took a flight on Virgin America. I read the magazine in the airplane, found an article that I thought was interesting. I ripped that out. I put that in my bag. When I get home, I'm going to take that out of my bag. I'm going to stick it in my folder. And the folder, on the top of it, says something very simple, 2016. So throughout this entire year, I'm gathering ideas that will eventually go into my 2016 trend report, because I do this every year. And so part of the idea is that when I'm curating these observations of the accelerating present, I'm putting them into a place that I can look at them afterwards, right? So we talked about how it's an observation of the accelerating present and the pieces that I put together. But the habits that I use, and this is essentially what it takes in order to be able to do this. Now, we talked about being observant, right? Seeing what other people don't see, picking your head up, paying attention, right? That's the first habit that you need to embrace in order to be able to do this. The second is being curious, asking why. Why are gum sales down at the checkout market, right? Why are these things happening? When you ask why, you get interesting answers, because a lot of times people don't think about why. They just kind of accept why something's happening. They don't pay attention. The third is being thoughtful, taking the time to think about it. Again, something that's very, very difficult in our daily lives to be able to do. But if you're able to take the time to think about things, it makes a difference. Being elegant is all about crafting beautiful ways of describing it. Now, that's about simplicity. Right? It's about 17,000 bottles instead of 50,000 bottles. Right? It's about taking it down to just what you need. And the last one is being fickle. And we generally don't see being fickle as a positive thing, right? Fickle people are disloyal. They don't pay attention. They have what I've heard often is called ADDOS, attention deficit disorder. Ooh, shiny, right? Like they can't pay attention to stuff. But being fickle also allows you to move on. You don't dwell on things. You capture an article from a Virgin America airline ride, and you don't exactly know what it means, but you rip it out and you save it, because 6 months later, when you go back and look at it, you have context, right? You can put it against other things. And when we start to collect ideas in this way, similar to how frequent flyers collect frequent flyer miles, right? You don't collect miles from a trip and then use them right away. You collect them into a pool, and then eventually they become useful for that vacation that you take 2 years down the road, or maybe 6 months down the road, depending on how much you travel, right? That's how we need to start collecting ideas. That's the process. That's how we do it, okay? So when I do this every year, I release a report. And at the end of each year, I release a trend report. I called it the NonObvious Trend Report for 4 years. And then this year is the 5th edition of it. And what I did very transparently in this 5th edition, in this book that some of you have now, is I not only shared what the trends are going to be, which I'm going to get into in just a second, so I'm not going to leave you hanging on the trends. We're going to go straight into trends now. But in addition to the trends, I also talk about the process for how I do it, and also go backwards and look at 4 years of trends and say, look, this one was good, this one worked, and this one didn't, and here's why. So what Bryan talked about in terms of failing, I have failures of trends, and I publicly put those into the new book. And one of the trends you'll see that we'll talk about is kind of about not just failing and learning from it, but celebrating and publicizing failure because it makes you more human. Right? And that's a different piece of failure, right? But sometimes it gives you power to be able to do that. So these led into 2 books, one about healthcare and the one that you hold in your hand, which is just specifically about trends. And essentially it focused on why trends are trends and what isn't a trend and what we often hear. So a lot of times we hear that 2014 or 2015 is the year of mobile tablets, right? That's a typical trend. Or marketers create hashtag strategies, right? What's a hashtag strategy? Who knows, right? But it's hot, it's popular, we got to do it right now. It's super important. And 4K TVs and 3D printing is totally mainstream. Right? Now we're at a digital event, we're super savvy people. Raise your hand if you have a 4K TV and a 3D printer at home. Okay. Maybe 2 people that are too embarrassed to raise their hands, but that's it, right? And we're a pretty savvy audience. We're not, we're not like right at the ground level trying to get our first email addresses, right? And yet, this stuff is what we hear about going mainstream. And the problem with these is they're obvious facts sometimes, they're short-lived fads, or they're just plain wishful thinking. If you sell hammers and 2015 is the year of hammers, that's not a trend. That's just you trying to help your own business, right? But sometimes we hear that all the time, and that's the problem. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So what does the trend have? There's 3 different pieces. I want to make sure I didn't do that, because that would be dumb. There's 3 pieces, right? Idea, acceleration, and impact. It has to be a quantifiable idea that you can describe and that you have examples for. It has to be accelerating, getting more important, more valuable, more useful over time. It has to have an impact, either in how business is done, how business models are being rolled out, or how we behave. Why we choose to buy something, why we choose to believe something, if you're more on the belief side, right? Because not everybody sells a product. Sometimes you're selling an idea, right? You're working on a nonprofit, you're trying to convince somebody to change the way that they see the world. So what does this all point to? What are the trends? Right, I've led you up to this point to say, look, here's the process, and this guy, and you're right now probably thinking, okay, so this guy doesn't buy gum at checkout aisles, and he reads airplane magazines. What does that mean? How do these things fit together? So what I want to do is give you a couple of examples of trends, and what I'm going to do with each one is something a little bit unique. I have never done this before up until kind of 2 weeks ago, and it worked that time once, so I'm going to try it again. That's my sample size of once, right? So you guys are a little bit of guinea pigs, but I figure, we're in that kind of studio place, like it's almost like a wrestling match without an opponent, so, I kind of feel like that. So what I'm going to do is share a couple of different stories, and then instead of giving you some actionable tips, I'm going to flip it and give you one stealable idea. One thing that you can take and use in your business immediately, like tonight. And that's my way of not just saying this is trends for the future, and this is what the future is going to look like, but offering impact, right? Helping you do something today with that trend. So that's my goal, and you guys will have to honestly let me know if I do it or not, okay? So the first trend is everyday stardom. It's the growth of personalization that's leading consumers to have higher expectations. They want celebrity experiences, right? And they expect to be the stars of the show. So Disney spent $1 billion with a B on the Magic Band technology, right? And the Magic Band technology says, you walk into a Disney park, you can pay for your food there, you can open your room with this Magic Band, and if you choose, you can walk up to the character and Mickey Mouse will say, hey, Rohit, how are you? Right? Creepy, but cool, because it knows you. And now every retailer is looking at what Disney's done, spending $1 billion with a B, and saying, oh my God, we need to start doing that. Because how awesome would it be to be able to have someone walk in and say, oh, how are you enjoying those jeans you bought last week? Do you want to get a shirt that matches? Right? That's the level of personalization that these retailers are trying to accomplish, because that's what we see. We've got YouTube superstars, right? Individuals like Michelle Phan, who basically created a YouTube channel of herself filming herself putting on makeup and got so popular that she has millions of fans, and now L'Oreal's come to her and said, look, we're going to launch a signature line of makeup with your name on it. And YouTube's put her on billboards in the middle of Times Square. This is just one person, right? This is not a media empire, and yet she's a superstar. She's a celebrity now. How many of you guys have heard about that kid, right? What a cool story. It's a little kid who wanted to be that kid and save the city. And the entire city came together with a hashtag, of course, because it's San Francisco, right? And that kid saved the city. And we all watched as that happened. And a little kid got to be a superstar. Everyday stardom. Little kid becoming a superstar. Right? And Bollywood weddings, if you've ever watched any of these Bollywood movies or if you've seen any of this cinema, and of course I grew up with all of this stuff, right? And it's so iconic within Indian culture. But now, at Bollywood weddings and Indian weddings, they are hiring film crews, recreating the scene from the Bollywood movie, right? And using that as their wedding invitation or as their wedding video so that they can be the stars of the film, literally, by recreating themselves dancing in the middle of the field, which is literally what they're doing here for the video, because they want to be the stars. And they can be. So what does this mean for your business? Well, here's the stealable idea. Offer a VIP experience, but that's obvious, right? Of course we want to treat our customers like VIPs, but sometimes they're not. So how do you treat your customers like VIPs, even though sometimes they're not VIPs and they don't spend very much money, and sometimes, you know, we all have that spectrum of customers, the ones we love and the ones that we kind of tolerate because they spend money, but we don't love. So there's a hotel brand called the Art Series Hotel in Australia that has beautiful marketing talking about the world's latest checkout. That's what they offer. And the way they do it is they say, hey, nobody else checks into your room, you can stay. Now think about that for a second, right? Only they know whether someone else has checked into your room or not. So the person at the counter could literally say, oh, that guy was an asshole when he checked in. Somebody checked into his room, sorry, he's got to get out, right? Or they can say, yeah, you can stay till 7 p.m., 8 p.m., no problem. Obviously, you have to check out before the next day, otherwise you're staying overnight, which is not really late checkout. That's just another day, right? So there is some logic behind this. But there's a VIP experience that they can offer basically to anybody, right? So the idea is you can treat people like a VIP and do it in a way that is real, that is based in reality, right? And it's possible. So there's a stealable idea, everyday startup. Okay? Just got working for you guys so far? Yes? Okay. All right. Second trend, mainstream mindfulness. The idea that mindfulness, meditation, thinking about things bigger than just the task that you have in front of you is a mainstream idea in business, right? And so part of the idea is, of course, Google with their chief jolly good fellow, as many of you probably are familiar with. There's a guy who has that title at Google, and he hosts meditation courses and helps employees be more mindful and put that into their work. He's got a book, of course. Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks, there was a bunch of huge stories about how the Seahawks are using yoga and meditation to kind of train differently, especially at summer camps. The coaches aren't allowed, supposedly, I haven't been to training camp there, but the coaches supposedly aren't allowed to yell at the players. They're supposedly meant to be saying to them, hey, you know, you could do this better, which, I mean, think about the NFL coach mentality, right? I mean, these guys are literally sometimes drill sergeants who then went into the NFL, and they're having to retrain themselves on how to motivate their players. But there's a lot of evidence showing that that's actually paying off for them as a team. I mean, they made the Super Bowl twice. They didn't win second time, but, you know, pretty close. There's devices that fit this space. So there's the Think neurosignaling wearable. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but it is experimenting with sending electrical impulses into your brain to help you calm down or change your state of mind via electrical impulses. So now, if you want to get centered, you could take a deep breath, right, which we've been told to do, or you can put on the Think helmet, and it'll take the deep breath for you, right? And it'll help you get into that state of mind and help you be optimal for whatever you have to do next. These are the sorts of technologies that are coming in. And Wisdom 2.0 was a conference that just happened over here on the West Coast, talking about a lot of applications for this, and how LinkedIn as a business is really investing heavily in trying to do this and trying to be more mindful, right? So one of the stealable ideas around this is introducing meditative moments into daily routine. So what does that mean? Well, one example that I've seen in a couple of different companies that I've gone into is when they have back-to-back meetings, they have a required moment of silence, almost like somebody died, even though they didn't. And they'll say, okay, before we start the next meeting, we're going to time it on our phone for 120 seconds, and we're just going to be silent. Everybody's just going to be silent. And the mental resetting that happens for everybody, just by taking 2 minutes, which is not a long period of time, but when you're silent for 2 minutes, it seems like a really long period of time, right? If you've ever had to kind of sit still or be silent for those moments of silences in the stadium, it's a long time. But that moment allows your brain to reset. You move from one meeting to the next, and you actually have a more productive meeting because you're not bringing in the baggage from the previous meeting or the previous thing you've done. Now, any one of us can do this. We all have meetings. We all have 2 minutes to spare, right? We may not think we do, but we have 2 minutes to spare. What if we could have that mental reset with our team? I'm not saying take your entire team to a yoga retreat, right, and spend an entire weekend getting to know each other and put your body into weird, awkward poses. Maybe you do that. Maybe you don't. Maybe you just take 2 minutes in between a meeting. Totally realistic, right? We can all do that. Okay, third trend, branded benevolence. This is the idea that companies can actually have purpose at their center and do something valuable for the world. And not only that they can do it, but that a greater range of consumers are now expecting them to do it. And it's a big deal when they don't, right? So Tesla, sharing all of their patents, is an example of branded benevolence, even though there's two schools of thought on that, on why they did it and all the background behind it, but pretty out there to say, take your patents and say, we're going to give it to the world. CVS giving up $1 billion, again, with a B, in revenue, right? Because they stopped selling tobacco. That's a lot of money. We know CVS makes money on selling tobacco, right? And we know that they're losing money because they chose not to sell tobacco. And yet they believe in the greater span of time that the customer loyalty and purpose and commitment that that shows is going to pay off for the brand. That's a big bet, right? That's what consumers are seeing out there. And then they see examples like Tom's Shoes or Whole Foods with conscious capitalism. I mean, the stories of companies having purpose are out there on every level. And if you think that that's only for big companies, or if you think that's only for established companies that can make big impact, it's not. This is where consumer expectation gets driven, because they see big examples. We all see big examples like this. And what it means is we expect that. Right? So this is about consumer behavior and consumer mentality. And your consumer, whether you're dealing with individual consumers or you're a B2B business, this is the space that we all play in, right? This is the world. And what you'll see is I very specifically don't say this is a healthcare trend, this is a financial trend, this is a retail trend, this is a something else trend. I don't categorize trends by industry categories, right? Because these examples are all over the place. But they do describe mentality shifts, right? How we make decisions, how we choose to believe. That's what these are describing, right? That's the pieces that we want to put together. So Coca-Cola did a campaign that went super viral. That was another vending machine. That's their thing, right? They put these vending machines out. Many of you probably saw this YouTube video where someone in Pakistan had to put their hand up against the glass, and someone in India had to also put their hand up, or they had to like mimic each other or do like a dance against each other, and then they would get the Coke coming out of the machine on both ends, right? But they had to actually team up in order to make that happen, right? So a vending machine, right, trying to promote world peace by bringing two countries that fight all the time together over something like a Coke fits perfectly for Coke, right? But it's another example of the utility and the mission that people are seeing brands start to take, right? You could say, oh, they're just trying to sell more Coke, but at the end of the day, like, that doesn't sell that much Coke, right? Now, their product costs nothing to make, so they have to spend the money somewhere, right? So they're in a unique situation, but that's the sort of thing we see. So Here's a Southern California example that you guys might be familiar with, Helpful Honda, right, which I wrote about last year, and I talked to the guys behind it, and it's fascinating, right, because it's a bunch of dealers saying, hey, we're just going to try and be helpful. We're going to give you free ice cream. We're going to pay for toll. We're going to give you free gas, right? We're just going to be in the community, and we're going to be helpful because we think that that's going to demonstrate how much we care about you, even to the point where if you actually walk in and you consider getting a car from us, we won't treat you like a number, and we won't try and give you the hard sell. Right? That's the message. We all get it. We're not stupid. We know they're selling cars, but they're trying something outside of the world of selling cars, and it's been working year after year. Right? Are you guys familiar with that? You guys must know that, right? Okay. All right, good. I was a little bit scared putting it in front of you guys because it's your realm. Like when I give it to other audiences, they're like, oh, wow, they're doing what? Like they didn't know because it's here, right? Okay, fourth trend, the reluctant marketer. This is all about what we've heard. How many people have heard about content marketing, right? The power of content marketing. Okay, so reluctant marketing is kind of about that. It's kind of about this idea that instead of giving people that promotional 2-for-1, here's the 5 benefits, here's the reasons you should consider us type of content, you're actually providing value. You're giving them value. And that's worth it. That's worthwhile. Right? So nobody wants a branded content story, right? Daddy, instead of a story, can you read me some branded content? What kid would ever say that? What consumer would ever say that? Right? We're not looking for branded content. We're looking for real stories. So here's a real story from several years ago. Right? I was in the market for a grill. I didn't know what I wanted because I never had a house that was big enough to have a grill, but finally I got one. So I'm like, okay, the first thing I'm going to get is a grill because the week before I had to go shopping for something that I'd never heard of, and once I'd heard of it, I was immediately sad that I even knew what it was, which is a sconce. You guys know what a sconce is? Yeah, no guy would ever want to know what a sconce is. It's like one of those like things that go up on your wall, and it's like a light, and it's just, I wish I never heard of sconces, right? So I had to equalize that by buying something I really wanted, which is why I was in the grill market. So I was in the grill market, knew nothing about it, went online, of course, did my Google search, found out about grills, and the first thing I had to figure out is gas grill or charcoal grill. That's like the first religious choice you have to make in the grill market. I don't know what I'm looking for, right? And all I see is a bunch of people over here saying, oh my God, you gotta get the gas grill because the charcoal's so inconvenient and it's not healthy for you and 12 other reasons. And then the charcoal people are like, it's not a real grill unless it's charcoal, and they are all about the charcoal grill. And I find this one PDF, and this one PDF says how to choose a grill. Oh, how to choose a grill, perfect. So I click on the PDF, and of course it's a PDF, so I print it out, and it's 6 pages long. And it tells me all of the arguments, the pros and the cons, and it's very nicely argued out. And the last page has a checklist, right? And of course the PDF is from Weber, right? And the last page has a checklist. And the checklist says, okay, now that you've read everything you should look for, here's the things that you can get in a grill. Check off the ones that are most important to you and take this to your dealer. Right? Which totally makes sense because people don't buy a grill online, right? It's a weird item, it's huge. So you do your research online and then you walk into a store. That's how grills are purchased, right? That's the consumer behavior of buying a grill. So I walk into my dealer store with my checklist, and I'm very proud of myself for having done all my research. And the guy in the store looks at that and he says, okay, here's the Weber grill you should buy. They made the sale before I ever walked into the dealership. And they made it not by telling me about the 6 features that they have and the little night light so I can cook in the dark, right? Or all of the other stuff that they have, which of course they could. They don't talk about that. They say, hey, you're trying to figure out what grill to buy? We're going to help you answer your question. And by helping me answer my question, they provide value. And by providing value, they made the sale. Right? That's how content marketing works. That's how reluctant marketing works. They're not trying to pitch me on why Webers are the best. That, by the way, is why they've had books teaching people how to grill for more than a decade. So before anybody was talking about content marketing, Weber was publishing books and putting them in Barnes & Noble and Borders and all the other bookstores that used to be around that aren't anymore. So that when you walked into the cooking section or the grilling section, and if you have a grilling book at your house, I guarantee you it's more than a 50% chance it's printed and produced by Weber. That was content marketing. Because every picture of every grill in that book is, guess what? Weber grill, right? So they're reinforcing that over and over, and that's why they're dominant. There's another example of reluctant marketing through an experience. So there's an experience that this theater in Barcelona tried out, which is, it's a stand-up comedy theater, and they decided that they were going to pioneer a pay-per-laugh model. So instead of charging you a ticket, they said, hey, come to our show, we guarantee it's gonna be funny. And we're gonna put an iPad on the back of the seat, and we're gonna track your facial movements, and we have face tracking. And each time you laugh, we're gonna charge you 15 cents, up to a maximum of 30 euros per show. So you know that if it's funny, you're gonna pay 30 euros, and if it's not funny, hey, you don't have to pay that much if you don't laugh, right? Pay per laugh. They had media attention around the world for this idea, right? Because they pioneered something useful. They didn't have to do any marketing, right? Because the idea was so good and so unique that it marketed itself. That's the power of reluctant marketing. The idea is so good, the value is so important and so impactful that you don't even have to do the marketing anymore, right? That's the power. That's what we want to get to. Hilton has a program called Hilton Suggests, where essentially they go onto Twitter, and if anybody asks any kind of question, they answer it. Somebody lands in DC and says, hey, I want a burger. What burger joint should I go to? Hilton Suggests is right there saying, hey, here's a great burger joint in DC. Person doesn't have to be staying at a Hilton. In fact, he probably isn't. They're just trying to be helpful. That's the idea. Right? And they have a devoted team that sits there doing this. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, Hilton, of course, can afford to have a team of people sitting there. But you all have moments, we all have moments in our business where we could choose to be helpful instead of choosing to sell something. Right? Just a choice we have to make. So here's the stealable idea, not surprisingly. Be useful instead of salesy. There's a great drum shop from Memphis called the Memphis Drum Shop, right? Very clear where they're from, what they do. They sell percussion instruments online. And if you go to their YouTube channel, they have a very unique YouTube strategy, which is they have thousands of videos that are guaranteed not to go viral. Thousands of videos guaranteed not to go viral. Why? Because they have their employees sitting there playing the drum set. It's something only a drummer would listen to, because it's boring. If you're just seeing a guy playing a drum there, it's not very interesting. But each one of those videos, that drummer is playing a very specific product, and you can purchase that product down to the SKU number. So for drummers, it's hugely valuable. Now, every one of their videos has a couple hundred views. A few of them have gotten up to a couple thousand. That's it. But across their channel, they have more than 8,000 videos. And across those 8,000 videos, they have more than 12 million views. So their channel is viral when their videos aren't. And their channel is viral because it's useful. So there's a different way to think about using social media that isn't about having that one big hit, right? No band starts, no musician starts a career saying, I'm going to be a one-hit wonder, right? Who would have that strategy and start a music career? Nobody. And yet that's what happens to many of them. And in marketing, we do the exact opposite, which is we gun for that viral video. It's like as if we were the musician saying, all we want is the one-hit wonder and we're done. We know that doesn't work. It doesn't work in marketing because you're a blip. People see you and then they forget you. That's not what you want. You want to be of value over a period of time. That's when you're valuable. Okay? All right, last trend is unperfection. This is what I alluded to before. The idea that when you make mistakes, there's a lot of value in owning up to those mistakes. And in fact, there may be a huge enough value that you want to choose to be imperfect on purpose. Imagine if you did that, right? Because imperfect is not the same thing as broken. Broken means it doesn't work. Imperfect means it's not perfect, literally, right? And when we think about things that aren't perfect, sometimes they're more desirable because they're not perfect. Like Crocs or Uggs. Are these perfect design items? Anybody in the fashion business, right? This must be the most frustrating brand for anybody in the fashion business, either one of those. Because they would look at those and say, oh my God, who would ever wear that in public? That's the ugliest thing ever. And yet, fans of either one of these products wear them everywhere and swear by them and will never take them off. Because they've made a statement, right? What's the statement they're making? Comfort is more important than anything else. So I will wear the ugly shoes because, damn it, I'm comfortable, right? That's the choice they're making. But it's clear why they're doing it. They're choosing imperfection because it has more value for them, right? Wired magazine did an entire cover spread on design theory and wrong theory, and he talked about choosing to misalign things or use a different font in design because it arrests your attention, right? So there's a real design theory behind imperfection. Food is being manufactured to be imperfect on purpose. You've got artisan pizza, you've got the Egg McMuffin, right? You guys remember the Egg McMuffin that's been around forever, right? Looks like a perfect hockey puck. And then, like 2 years ago, McDonald's introduced the Egg White McMuffin, right? Now, I'm no culinary specialist, but it is possible to make an Egg White McMuffin as a perfect hockey puck, right? Technically, it's possible. They clearly chose not to do that. They chose to make it look imperfect. They chose to make it look like a human actually made it, right? That's an intentional, deliberate choice, which if you imagine McDonald's and the scale of McDonald's is not something that's just done on a whim. That someone did some research behind that to say, look, this is what our Egg White McMuffin should look like, because people actually want to know that a human made it and that they can't play hockey with it, right? That's important. There's an entire campaign by a French supermarket chain called Inglorious Foods. And the whole idea is, even if a fruit or a vegetable looks like that, if you make it into a juice or a soup, it tastes the same. And their entire campaign is all about encouraging people to embrace these inglorious foods, because right now, what's happening, right? Farmers aren't growing perfect fruit and vegetables. What they're doing is they're growing everything and they're throwing out anything that looks like that before it gets to our supermarket, which is food wastage. So during International Month of Food Wastage, or whatever they called the month where they were putting global attention on this, right? Because it's a big problem. Farmers are growing all kinds of stuff and then we're just throwing it away because it looks like that, even though it would taste perfectly fine. So they created an entire campaign. They said, hey, could we get people through marketing to embrace imperfection and to actually buy these? And so they took these fruits and vegetables and they created an entire stand for them, and then they sold soups and juices made from fruits and vegetables that look like this. They even did taste tests. So they said this one was made with a perfect orange, and this one was made with an unperfect, inglorious orange. Tell me the taste difference. Of course, you can't tell the taste difference, right? So they're making a point through imperfection. And my personal favorite example of this, which is the Hans Brinker Budget Hotel in Amsterdam, which has done marketing like this for more than 10 years, saying, don't ask me to take you to the Hans Brinker Budget Hotel. Our maids work twice as hard because we only have one. Sorry for being excellent at losing your luggage. These are real posters. Now, with a free key with your room, right? Free toilet flushing, and their tagline says, welcome to the Hans Brinker Budget Hotel. We've been proudly disappointing travelers for 40 years, boasting levels of comfort comparable to a minimum security prison. The Hans Brinker also offers some plumbing and an intermittently open canteen serving a wide range of dishes based on runny eggs. Right, this is their marketing. They give you cardboard cutouts of all the items they don't offer, such as a telephone, a hairdryer, a comb. Their games room is a Post-it note where you can play tic-tac-toe. And they have brochures with asterisks next to everything that's not included, such as maids, lamps, linens, windows, curtains. Not one of the best hotels is what their star bubble says on top. And ranked in terms of desirable places to stay in Amsterdam, they are immediately below an abandoned mine shaft and just above an unmarked grave. Right? Now, if all of this marketing wasn't leading you to something, they have their best tagline, and they change their tagline every year, but it's some version of this. But they have their best tagline ever, which I think is this. The Hans Brinker Budget Hotel. It can't get any worse, but we'll do our best. Now, why does this marketing work? Right? Obviously it works, otherwise I wouldn't put it up here. But why does it work? Right? Who would want to stay at a minimum security prison-like hotel with runny eggs that has a crap experience? Why would anybody stay there? Well, their target audience, right, a budget hotel is basically a hostel. And their target audience is backpacking 20-year-olds. And a backpacking 20-year-old doesn't have the money for comfort anyway. But what they are doing is they're traveling the world on the most important trip that they've ever had in their lives. And they want to share that with everybody. And what better experience to share with everybody than staying at the world's worst hotel that couldn't get any worse, but they're really trying hard to make it worse. And then telling all of your friends that you lived there, you stayed there, and you survived, and you made it out. And guess what? When they do all of this marketing and they paint this picture of this awful, awful hotel experience, and you get there, it's actually not as bad as they said, right? You're amazed. You're like, this is the best thing ever, because they actually do have a bed, and they actually do have pillows, right? And you're happy because they set your expectations way down here, right? It's like Zappos' old trick when they first launched. They said, okay, you know what? Our business model is we're going to ship everything to people overnight, but we're not going to tell them that. We're going to give everybody 2-day shipping. They're going to pay for 2-day shipping, or they'll get free 2-day shipping, and then we'll just upgrade them to overnight shipping, which is what we were going to do anyway. But they'll be happy because they didn't expect it. And of course, what happened? Customers are like, oh my God, they made a mistake. They shipped it to me overnight. I can't believe it. I got it a day earlier, and they were happy. When Zappos planned to do that from the beginning, they just didn't tell you. Right? They're over-delivering and under-promising. Right? The classic example that any consultant has ever learned, right? Under-promise, over-deliver, people are happy. Hans Brinker does that with an unperfect experience. And it works for them, so much so that when you walk in there, right, and you walk into the lobby, there's only 2 things you can do there. You can check in, or you can buy a book of the last 10 years of experience, like those Absolute Vodka books, right, that have all of those Absolute Vodka ads that we've all seen. They have that kind of book for all of their ads because they've become so iconic for them that it's important to people. That's unperfection. So how do you use unperfection? What's the stealable idea? Well, here's a error page from Uniqlo when their site was down. Right? Now, I want you to take a moment to appreciate the subtle brilliance of this error page. Instead of a 404 error page, they give you a page error haiku, which fits because they're Japanese, right? And they say, site is so busy, take a breath, restart browser, and try again soon. And underneath it, they say, apologies. We hope our haiku turns this unpleasant experience around. Feel free to share it with your friends. And be sure to use the navigation or search box at the top of the page to find what you're looking for. So they're not only saying, our site's down and we screwed up, they're saying, here's a cute haiku version, share that with your friends. Right? That's the ultimate way of turning unperfection around and making it your friend. Right? Embrace your humanity, embrace your mistakes. Now, what I said before, this doesn't work if you're always broken, right? If your site is never up, a cute haiku is not going to do anything, right? Because people just get more and more pissed off over time. But if you make the occasional mistake, you can own up to it, you can avoid it, or you can celebrate it. Choose to celebrate it. Because sometimes that earns you a lot more points and credibility than anything else, right? That's unperfection. So I talked about earlier this idea of making you into speed understanders, or giving you the tools to be a speed understander instead of a speed reader. A speed reader consumes everything. A speed understander picks out the things that matter. A speed understander finds those 17,000 bottles. A speed understander takes these stories, puts those pieces together, and says, you know what, I can use this one idea, even though it's in an industry that's completely unrelated to my industry. That's where the power comes from, right? Being able to do that. So I want to offer you something. I want to give you something, and I want to ask you for help with something. So the give is, if you want a sneak peek at next year's report, which I'm going to release a couple of trends from, probably in October, and then the rest of the report's going to come in January. This is the place to sign up for that. So along with that, you'll get a digital version of the trend and then access to the previous trend reports and all sorts of stuff. So this is not an invitation for me to email you every other day saying, hey, you want to hear about trends today? I don't do that, right? This is just, you'll get a bunch of stuff early, and then maybe once or twice I'll give you something related to the next trend report, but that's it, right? So it's not a sign-up list like maybe you guys are familiar with. That's my give. The ask is, if you found some of these trends useful, one of the things that I do is, clearly I shared a lot of stories. I search for stories of companies doing this, and I speak at events around the world. So if you have a story of how some of these trends are either applying to your business or being used, or there's an interesting aspect to this that I might be able to feature to help you promote your business, I would like to do that. There's a lot of your business owners, you're working for interesting companies. Clearly I shared the Southern California Honda example. I shared the Memphis Drum Company, which is basically something I found by asking. So if you have a story that I can feature, I would like to feature you. So hopefully you have those cards with my email address. I think that's my email address right there. So feel free to get in touch. Test me out on the nice guy promise, because I will get back to you personally. I don't have a filtration system to make sure that no email ever gets to me, which is unfortunate for me because I get a lot of emails, but I do respond to them. So I invite you guys to do that. I appreciate you sticking around, sticking with me. I appreciate you, Bryan, for hosting this and for being who you are. So big hand for you and for me together. And thank you.